So if you guys know, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about Ted Lasso on the podcast because we knew season 4 was coming out. We kind of wanted to see what characters were coming back and what characters were not going to come. But honestly, after I did that, I was kind of thinking, why? We're so quick to give these shows revelations because they made money. These characters did resonate with people. But I really want to ask a question while thinking about this. Because I watched Ted Lasso when it came out. That last season came out. Right when season 3 came out, I binge watched the first 2 seasons, watched season 3, and just, bawled out, had my moments with it. So when it was done, I thought I was done with it. I felt that catharsis that you get when you're done with a really good show, with a really good story arc. So to see that, hey, we're going to get the whole Richmond gang back together. We see Leslie, we see Kelly, we see Rebecca, we see Roy. And knowing what Ted Lasso means to people, being a authentically good guy just for the sake of being a authentically good guy, I was starting to think, were we just going to be throwing out good vibes again like Brooklyn Nine-Nine did with their later seasons? Were we just giving people more of what they wanted and not really digging anything deeper into it? That's the question that I had going into Ted Lasso season 4. What would Ted Lasso season 4 even be about? What would we even get about exploring women's football? What types of stories and allegories were this show ready to explore by putting its titular character, who already went through a 3-season arc and reconciled his divorce, reconciled who he is beyond his family? Was I ready to see this character jump back into the ring? And I was ready to see it. I was ready to see if episode 1 and episode 2 could answer this question for me. And to be honest with you, episode 1 throws you right in the middle of it. We see Ted bringing that happy-go-lucky energy that he has to being an assistant manager at a grocery store. Hear me out. The man that brought AFC Richmond out of the Premier League to the Champions League is now an assistant manager at a grocery store. And he's a good one, though. I'm not even going to lie. He knows one of the employees is stealing, so he goes and plays this prank on him by taking all this product and stuffing it all inside of the locker next to the kid, stuffing it and telling him, like, yeah, I've been doing this for years. But I hope you don't get caught. Kind of scaring the guy straight. And even when like Ted talks to the manager, he gives the kid some credit, some slack. So, Ted's just out here being good man as he can. But he does run into a former player of his, Joe Conroy. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Like, I do not know much about sports in general. But football, Marshawn Lynch, that's all I got for you. Ted sees this old player of his head. Player has this kid around his neck, and they start talking about being a fathers, and they're bonding over it. But that's when you kind of start seeing the cracks in Ted's life. Ted talks about how he went out 3 years, gives you a whole entire story of Ted Lasso, the original series. But he talks about how he came back so he could be closer to his son, watch his son growing up. Because even in season 3, there was a lot of like things going on with Henry, and Ted didn't want to be away as these things were happening. He wanted to be able to watch his son grow up, support his son as he was going through the hardships of being a boy. But as he's struggling to find his place in this world, just being an assistant manager at this store, you kind of see that he's just not happy. He has a smile, but he's not happy. Shortly after this, we see the Richmond game. Rebecca, Leslie, Kelly, they've come down to watch a local women's soccer match. And they've come to stop by to meet Ted. We even see him do a little trick on them where he closes the garage door but runs out to greet them. And then we have this really good scene of them out eating that Midwestern barbecue. They make a little bit of joke about Kansas City is in Missouri, but Kansas is next to Missouri, and this is a whole big mess of geography. They keep looping back to it a bunch of times because they're traveling between the two areas. But even at barbecue lunch, you get this idea that it's been kind of stagnant for these guys for the last 3 years. Kelly's doing good in her career, but that's all she's been doing. She's just been in her career. Rebecca is still in that honeymoon phase with her man, but that's mostly due to the fact that her job leaves her busy and she only really goes out to see him when they're traveling. And nobody really wants to bicker about mess when they're traveling and they're back and forth. And Higgins is like Leslie Higgins is just being the good boy he always is, talking about all these things going on with his sons and all this remodeling he did in his family. Now, this little reunion is not without its awkward tensions. Ted kind of scoops over what he's doing in life, and it also kind of leads into the reason why they're out here anyway. And the gang asks Ted if he would come and coach their women football team. Ted hits him with this super maybe. He's like, nah, maybe. I'll think about it. And it kind of doesn't give anybody any confidence. But because they're in town for a few days, they're going to see Henry's game. There's a big Major League women's football game coming out, or a soccer game coming soon. They're going to wait for Ted's answer after the fact. Now, on the way to Henry's game, Ted does tell Henry, like, hey, yo, my coworkers are out here. These guys. And Henry kind of asks, like, hey, well, are they here to offer you a job? Ted tells Henry straight up, like, no, I'm not going to take the job. I want to stay here with you, my boy. And there's kind of like this tender moment that, like, Ted's kind of holding himself back because he wants to make sure he's here for Henry. He wants to make sure the things that happened in season 3 don't happen again. Where Henry's getting bullied, he's getting picked on, and there's no one there to support him. Now, after they get this hard maybe from Ted, we do get a little bit of information from Leslie that the women's team is seeking so much money out of AFC Richmond that if the women's teams don't break even or bring a profit, that the financial fallout will affect its men's team and they may not have a team anymore. This gets Rebecca a little, but she shakes it off and says, we're going to get a good coach, we're going to get a good team, and we're not going to worry about it. We're just going to push forward. But next day at the game, man, we get Ted telling Henry he's not going to leave him. You got Rebecca having this big chip on her shoulder. But at the game, we start seeing another crack in Ted's life here. The gang asked Ted why he's not coaching Henry's team because he's such a good coach. And he says Coach him and Dad him are two separate characters, two different people. He doesn't want to do that to Henry. But we also see Henry being picked on by the coach because even though Henry made a good play, it wasn't the play that the supervisor wanted him to do. So he felt bad about it. You do kind of see Ted a little bit on edge. He presses the coach at the end of the game and basically says, like, hey, you didn't have to do that to my son. He may have disobeyed your orders, but, he made a good play. And he said, you know what, Mr. Lasso? Keep your opinions to yourself. Which kind of gets Ted a little ticked. It's surprising to see Ted get mad. I like how there's also a lot of C-plots in this episode. Something Ted Lasso really does a lot of time when they go international outside of Britain is they do a lot of these location shots, a lot of these location scenes. And there's two major ones that I want to kind of talk about. There's this whole entire thing with Rebecca and Keeley where they go into this Midwestern boutique where the owner has been, doing her best since the housing crash, but she does a lot of her good sales online, that she's very proud of all her work. And even though Rebecca doesn't really vibe with the style, she likes the girl's entrepreneurship so much that she just buys a really nice piece. And you feel like it's not out of pity. This is Rebecca actually supporting someone who's doing good. It's not just a pity buy. It's just not since you've been struggling, let me help you out. It really does feel like, hey, I support your dreams. Women support women. And my best support is with my wallet. So she buys a good dress. And Rebecca even rocks that dress at the local women's game in a bit. She looks like a full-on cowgirl. Keeley's also with her, which is real nice. Keeley encourages her. We also see Leslie accidentally having to take a tour of the National Negro Baseball Museum after his Jazz Museum ticket was not honored because they were closed, I believe. So it really cracks me up that we get this really good history about American baseball and how the Negro Leagues played a major point of love for these people because people couldn't pay for the stadiums at the Negro, or they couldn't pay a lot for all the stuff at the Negro Leagues. So you really have to understand that the players were there for the love of the game. They didn't get big multi-billionaire contracts and stuff, or even thousand air contracts like a lot of places did at the time. So I just like how we always do a cool little history story with Higgins. And it's never played off as preachy. It's never played off as holier than thou. It's just always good vibes when it comes to Leslie exploring something that he didn't know. Now, this does all kind of accumulate to right before the game. We get Ted running into trying to help his mom clean out some of the stuff that she's moving out of, some of the stuff that's in the house because she's moving out. And Ted runs into some of his dad's old keepsakes from his job at the grocery store. He goes down to his mom and he talks about like, hey, yo, Dad just used to love talking about his job all the time and just really love sharing it with us. Why don't you ever ask me about my job? And his mom probably hits like the hardest line ever. She straight up says, if you don't care to tell me about your job, why would I ask you? And it really hits Ted home. It super shows that he's super conflicted during the women's football game. And when we get back on the private jet, you kind of get this sense of idea that like, yeah, he told him no. Keeley tells him like, hey, I love you always. You're one of my best friends. This is not a goodbye hug. This is I'll see you later hug. And she gives him a hug. Higgins and him do a good old bro shake, good old I admire you. And Rebecca is gifted the locket she lost and is given the powers that she's unlocked. Sorry about that. Rebecca also gets on the plane, kind of taunting Ted and being like, hey, yo, like, I really wish you'll come with us, but I'm going to take this brisket, I'm going to take your love, and I'm going to think about you always. Ted starts driving home from all of that, drives through Kansas City, sees all his favorite place, takes a look at the tea bag Rebecca left him. There's a little joke on the fact that he never really enjoyed tea. And after going through all this memorabilia one more last time, going through his own Richmond memorabilia, he comes to the realization that, like, he does want to coach again. He texts Michelle and he asks, like, hey, what if we just move to England? And the text is right back. Sure, why not? A change of scenery would be nice. Ted says, what do you think Henry would think? And we get the drop that Henry was the one texting him. There's this whole entire bit that like Ted never charges the iPad, so Henry's always on her phone. And Ted's biggest fear of his family not moving with him, not being able to see his son grow up, is squashed, and the whole family is just going to end up going to Britain. And which is real cool. Like, Ted's ex-wife is real cool in that sense, where like they're both single, they are career people. Why not move and see a new part of the world? Mostly because like, AO, like we got a kid to raise. So episode 1 really does set up this idea of like, what is Ted is struggling with not having this fulfillment in his life. And he looks up to his dad. His dad is one of his biggest idol, and he wants to be more like his dad, who was always there for him. But his dad also he also needs to figure out his fulfillment in life, the balance in that. And I really hope that Ted Lasso season 4 is about that balance. I really think that Ted's coaching style is a reason why, or the way Ted coaches and the fallout of his professional life is probably the reason why his marriage broke up. And I'll be interested to see if we're actually going to confront some of those feelings now that Homegirl is going to England with us. Now, episode 2 is just a fire one. Less of a lore episode, more of catching up with everyone back in England. We start Ted's tenure back at AFC Richmond by going through the old famous halls that we used to go through the men's changing room that we spent so many seasons in. We even see him catch a glimpse of Roy being just as snappy with the press that he was in the original series. But after having a conversation with Higgins and Rebecca, I'm also thinking Rebecca about helping him get Michelle and Henry out here, we realize this episode is really going to be about introducing us to Coach Chilton. Higgins and Rebecca already have this feeling about Chilton that she's kind of a C word. I can't say it, I'm American. But Ted is eager to work with her as long as he can. Which, after this quick little exchange between Rebecca and her in the morning, is going to be Friday. Coach Chilton is not a big fan that a man is going to be coaching the women's team. And she even questions Rebecca about it. Kind of getting Rebecca in her own hand about her true intentions about being pro women, being a woman's woman. We do get to meet these new cast of ladies, and we will talk about them a little bit more down the line when we revisit this show. But you also kind of get these weird norms about women's soccer, how talented sisters who make it up the league are going to be in these lower divisions, how a lot of women are going to be dating because they're on the same team. Something that's kind of reflected in the WNBA too. You get the sense that this is going to be a same type of colorful cast that we got back in the original series. Now, as we get along, we notice that like when Roy and Ted reunite, they talk about Beard a little bit. They get it. We start learning that Beard is freaking out now that Ted is back, but also that Beard and his wife are going through something. We don't know what this is. After getting reacquainted with everything and seeing how shots the women's training room is, or the women's locker room is, you start to see that Ted realized that his job here is very hard and it's going to be an uphill battle, especially getting these women a permanent and normal spot to be able to change and be comfortable in. Now, there's this whole entire scene of like Rebecca spiraling out because Chilton kind of inferred that she wasn't a feminist, which is really funny because they made this whole entire joke about how inferring things or the assumption of things is the whole thing about things. Hilariously, like, oblivious. You do get this part where Keeley comes in and she asks Rebecca if they can have the visitors locker room for the women's team. She says no because they spent a lot of money on it. So she asks, can I have the old training room? And they said, the old OA room. And she says yes. Her and Roy even share this little moment that's Keeley's like signature move, the bait and switch. Ted's outside. We also get these scenes of like Ted kind of poking at Chilton, trying to break down that ice wall. But we see that wall instantly shut down once one of the players tears her AOC during practice. This player tore her whole ACL. Chilton immediately gets into assistant coach mode, nurturing mode, and follows the player out to the hospital. Ted, naturally just as concerned, waits for Chilton to get back, which surprises Chilton when she gets into the locker room. This is happening on her last day of this job. She tells Ted that, hey, my replacements are in the hallway ready for you to interview them. And Ted kind of has this heart-to-heart to her saying like, hey, I'm going to be honest with you. I really don't want anybody new. I'm going to be able to do this with you because I know your story. He goes about this whole entire story where Chilton was the player who torn her ACL 3 different times and gave up her dreams of being a football player. And how now she tries her best to make sure that other women don't have to go through the same journey she went through. He saw that caring side of her today out on the field. And he wants that coach on his team. He does his normal dad coach energy, turns around, gives her a chance to have her emotions, then turn around so she can act serious in front of him again. But it's just such a nice moment. One of those really good Ted Lasso moments. Now, I will say, during this whole entire time, you have this whole entire bit about Roy and Beard talking of having a breakup moment, a super on the nose breakup moment. But just as Ted and Chilton have finally broke down the wall, Beard is released as his contract as assistant coach of the male division and jumps into Ted's arm as the second assistant coach for the women's division, showing that we now have our main trio for this season. Real fire, real fire. We even get a little tidbit where Rebecca, struggling writing Chilton's recommendation letter, comes her and confronts her about throwing her through a loop all day, telling her, I regret that you won't see the fruit of this revelation. Chilton telling her, like, oh, I'm not going anywhere. Ted wants me. And getting Rebecca to be reprised. It really does show that, like, hey, this show knows the dynamic of these characters, know who we need to add, who needs to go and who needs to be added in, so we can have a really good ensemble cast and even showing a little bit of a tidbit to show why certain characters may be coming back in different seasons. I'm just saying. But it was nice. It was nice to see these characters. And to be honest with you, showing all these signs of now let's answer the question. Showing all these signs of Rebecca overthinking herself and doubting herself, showing how much emotional weight the women's team is throwing on her, showing that Ted is not fulfilled by just being a dad and is taking the grace that he gets from his ex-wife, them all moving out to England to really prove himself as a coach, showing that the ensemble cast back at ACF Richmond is still just as lovable as always. I do see that Ted Lasso season 4 really wants to do the true Cinderella story that season 1 was trying to do. Taking this unlikely underdog women's team to the championships, saving AFC Richmond, and saving everybody's bacon once again. I'm excited to see what Ted Lasso season 4 is going to do for us. And if you're excited to see what Ted Lasso season 4 is going to do for us, make sure you hit that like button, hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you check me out every week here on the Marz Variety Show, where we review the latest in TV. We talk about movies and TV shows. And then we're definitely going to wrap back on in to Ted Lasso season 4.